I'm David Clayton, and this is the Way of Beauty podcast, conversations on Catholic faith and culture. Hi, I'm here today with Simone Rizkallah. Have I pronounced that right?
Yes, very nice.
Okay, great. Who's based in Los Angeles. So this a Zoom-based podcast, of course, is one thing that can't be affected by the coronavirus yet. Simone is Director of Program Growth, she told me, at an organization called Endow, which is a very interesting mission, which has an overlap with the Way of Beauty and Pontifex University, we think. And so when we met a couple of weeks ago, I was interviewed by her for the Endow network on Instagram. So I'm now returning the compliment. And I'm very keen to find out more about you and about Endow. So just give us a quick overview of Endow, and then I'll start to ask you some questions about yourself.
All right. Well, a quick overview of Endow. Endow stands for Educating on the Nature and Dignity of Women. So it was inspired by John Paul II's writings on the feminine genius. And John Paul II said that every woman has a feminine genius, which is vitally essential to the church and to the world. So Endow mobilizes women into small groups to study the intellectual Catholic tradition of the faith in order to help women recognize and cultivate their feminine genius through study.
Okay, lots to ask about that, and
Lots
especially
yes.
Why this is the things I'll come back to. Why this might be especially needed to focus on women and their particular approach to things, and this mysterious phrase, the feminine genius, which I brought up when we spoke last time.
That's
right. And of course, used by artists a lot, particularly in relation to themselves.
Yes, that's right. This is an ongoing one of our intellectual conversations.
Yeah. As an artistic genius,
exactly what is it?
I'd love to know more about it, but we'll come back to that. First of all, just tell me about yourself. What's your story in faith? You were born into a Catholic family, is that right? And
yes, kind of. Yes. So I was born into a Eastern Rite Catholic and Greek Orthodox family, and my parents are immigrants from the Middle East. So in the Middle East, Orthodox, Eastern Rite Catholic, whatever, they're not having many theological spats. So when the children, me and my sister, were born, my dad kind of left it up to my mom whether she was going to raise us Greek Orthodox or Catholic, and she decided to stick with the Middle Eastern tradition of following the father. And my dad was Eastern Rite Catholic, Armenian Catholic to be precise. And so we were baptized and chrismated Armenian Catholic, but because there aren't there are more Latin Rite Catholic churches available in schools, so we kind of grew up breathing with both lungs, if you will, as John Paul II said in Unum Sint. So getting both the Latin Rite experience and the Eastern Rite experience and the Greek Orthodox experience. So
I'm curious to know, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being exposed to both?
That's a great question. It's because it's a bit confusing to talk about because we were raised in Latin Rite schools and parishes, but then our home is very Middle Eastern, which is tied to more of the Orthodox and Eastern Rite. But then my grandfather, Abdullah, was very much informed by evangelicals in Egypt, which who knew evangelicals made it out to Cairo. So I would say that we were really raised with kind of with that evangelical Protestant spirit of like being tied to the scriptures, which shouldn't be a Protestant thing, but oftentimes is because of a lack of education in the scriptures by Catholics and Orthodox. And then also the Catholic influence. But then my mom because my mom, this is funny, David, you'll laugh at this. When my mom married my dad, the priest who married them at the same time transferred her rights from Greek Orthodox to Armenian Catholic, and she didn't agree to that. So he's just, congratulations, you're Catholic now. And so we keep, my mom is kind of an interest. She's a very hilarious, interesting person, but in terms of where she fits in ecclesiastically, she'll say that now in her life, her brain is Catholic, but her heart is Orthodox. So I just said, well, that's be Eastern, right? That's perfect. But she can't quite say she's not Orthodox, but she certainly is Catholic. So it's all very interesting, and not at all the way that a Western like legal mind works. There's like a metaphysical complication there. But anyway, my faith journey, I think, very much is influenced in a positive way by the emphasis on beauty and mystery in the Orthodox and Eastern Rite Church that I think that the West can really learn from. I also really appreciated the fact that I got baptized and chrismated and received First Communion as an infant. I really love that. And I think, I don't want to get all controversial here, but I really hope to see the day in my lifetime when the Latin Rite actually does that, and as well. And we're seeing more of that. We're seeing more of that with not the reversal order, but returning to the ancient order of baptism and confirmation being a double sacrament, and then heading towards Eucharist. But so those were the positives of having kind of the Western intellectual tradition, but then having the mysticism and the Eastern beauty and mystery and traditions there, and not having the kind of the moralism that you see more in the West. The idea of like we didn't grow up thinking that missing Mass on Sunday was a mortal sin. And so we went to Mass regularly, but it wasn't because we at all in our psyche thought, oh, I'll go to hell if I don't go to Mass. It was just like what we did. On the other hand, when I did learn that it's an obligation to go to Mass on Sundays, that's also important to know. So, but I'm glad in a way that grace operated in my family, and that we had a love for the scriptures, not in a literalistic way, but in a devout way, and also that we worshiped out of freedom and not out of any sense of like hellfire or moralism, or and even my mom still, if I don't receive communion and she sees that I'm abstaining, she'll go, oh, come on, she thinks I'm too moralistic sometimes about that stuff. So the challenges were not really getting very well catechized, because unfortunately, like, American Catholic schools have not done a very good job evangelizing and catechizing. So there was that problem. And then being in a Middle Eastern Catholic household, having like the faith and the love for Jesus and the love for Mary and incense and all the things, but not being very well catechized. But at least approaching things with out of love and not out of any kind of like fear or condemnation. So, but it was challenging because like I just never felt like I fully belonged anywhere, and I still in many ways feel that way. So I just have to breathe with both lungs and be happy about how that can be a little bit complicated.
Yes, it's interesting, this point about the fear. Of course, it doesn't really come with the Catholic. I was a convert to Roman Catholicism, and actually that represented, because of confession. Yes. And because I think what helped me, I wasn't brought up Catholic. I didn't have any ideas about anxiety about going to hell, and none of that whatsoever. Right. And the way it was presented to me was very much in line with what you're describing. But I did discover that there are strains of that within Roman Catholicism. There seems to be more there than in Eastern Catholicism. Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of my friends who were raised in like very strictly, very clearly, devoutly Roman Catholic homes have left. Whereas in my house, I wouldn't say that my dad necessarily had a very strong Catholic attachment when we were kids. It's different now. Or my mom certainly did not, would identify with Orthodoxy. And yet somehow my sister and I end up being, papists. So it's just funny how that works. And then just to come back to your personal journey, so starting from that pretty good foundation as
Yeah.
a Christian, has it been a straight line of just sort of increased learning and devotion, or have you wavered at any point and had to consider it, especially as an adult? Or
Yeah. I had a crisis, I would say. I often reference Sherry Weddell's book, Forming Intentional Disciples, because she kind of outlines your stereotypical, like, basically the statistics show that Catholics leave the faith around 23 years old, and because they don't believe the church has reasonable philosophical answers to their questions, and so forth. And I think when I read that story in that book, it felt like my story in many ways, because at a certain point, you need to be asking the questions, and you need to feel like there are answers to your questions. And I neither felt like there were answers to my questions, and then there was no one to answer them. And I also was really scandalized by, I don't know how to put this in a PC way, but like the very watered down liberal homilies of California Catholicism, and feeling like that wasn't what my experiences and my encounters of Jesus, like in my faith and in my Middle Eastern American culture, were so rich. And then to go to your average like Catholic parish and to kind of hear what I thought was very dumbed down stuff, and then not a beautiful liturgy, which again, I wasn't in the Catholic bubble or the Catholic world at all. So it's not like I knew about, you know, the Tridentine Mass or Catholic schools. I didn't have any kind of Catholic context. I had a Middle Eastern context. And so there wasn't any kind of like agenda or bias. I was just a kid that grew up in California that went to masses, and at a certain point was like, this isn't beautiful. I'm not being spiritually fed, and I'm not getting answers to my questions. I'm unimpressed, unfortunately, with the catechetical program at my parish. Maybe that's just a precocious 13-year-old, I don't know. But like, I was scandalized by it. I didn't have that word then of being scandalized, but I was. And I thought at 23, like, I think I'm checking out. I think I'm checking out of this Catholic thing, and I don't want to be Catholic anymore. But I knew that I was a Christian. I believed in Jesus, but I don't think that this is his church, because I don't really experience any beauty in it.
Yeah.
Or truth.
Yeah. So, well, that's
yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. What you I'm not scandalized by what you described. It seems inevitable, given if you just randomly pick parishes in the US or in the UK, I would say that is what you'll find generally.
Yeah. And I certainly I wanted to be Catholic. I mean, I was very much like loving my church, but at a certain point in adulthood, it was like, well, what is it that I'm so excited about? Because I'm just not being fed, and it's not beautiful in any way. And I didn't know where to go. I had made a very definitive decision not to be a Catholic, and that I would be a Greek Orthodox, like my mom's side of the family, or I would be, you'll laugh at this, a London Baptist confessional of 1689 Calvinist. It's all very, I mean, could you be any more, but I was 20 something, 3 years old. And I it was like Greek Orthodoxy, because at least that's in my origin, or I would be a Calvinist, because they seem to be really strong about what they believe, and they're very charismatic, and they talk about Jesus, and they're not afraid of the word Jesus. And, their pastor looks me in the eye and cares about my life in a real way. And I had friends there, because you need Christian friends. So I don't have any in the Catholic Church. So it was gonna come down to one of those two things, but I never found peace in either one. And I was really a lost sheep, and started like loitering at the back of like church. My dad just kind of like hang out. Yeah. Which later, when I went to Egypt to visit family, actually people loiter at church all the time. It's just where they hang out. There's nowhere to go. So I thought maybe this is like in my blood. I don't know. Right. But I found a prayer by St. Ambrose of Milan, which was really, really moving to me. And I knew when I read that prayer, And I'll say the prayer. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's very beautiful. It goes like this: Teach me, O Lord, to search for you. Show yourself to me when I search for you. If you do not teach me first, I cannot seek you. If you do not reveal yourself to me, I cannot find you. In longing, may I search for you, and in searching, long for you. And in love, may I find you, and in finding you, may I love you.
Right.
It's beautiful. And I read that prayer and I thought, okay, this takes the burden off me and puts it on God. And if he wants to lead me somewhere, I'm just going to ask that he do so, because I'm exhausted. I kind of give up. And it was shortly thereafter that I think like the Holy Spirit moves fast when you kind of, pray with all of your heart and all your begging desire. And I met well-educated, devout, faithful Catholics and Catholic families. And it was amazing because they introduced me to theology, just amateur pop theology books that were super amazing and helpful to me, that very quickly I intellectually was converted to Catholicism. It finally made sense why this was the church. And there were people, like actual witnesses, because the intellectual conversion wasn't enough. Like, you need to have friends that worship with you and pray with you and teach you how to pray, and that you share life with. And that's like Christianity 101, is the encounter with those people. So if it wasn't for, I credit St. Ambrose for leading me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long ago was that you came back then?
That was about 11 years ago, 12 years ago. So I didn't really, it was like 23, 24, I started to, meet and have my reversion and get it. And then I would say it until, like 26, 27, I started to understand, like, there's like this whole other Catholic world, Pontifex University, so, that exists out there that I didn't even know. I mean, it was like walking through the wardrobe in Narnia, I didn't know there was all this out there. It was, me and my Lebanese Maronite friend and my sister wondering, I didn't know who to be with. So about 12 years ago.
Wow. Okay. So now you're director of program growth. I asked you your title. You work for Endow.
Yeah.
Tell us about Endow and its special mission. You gave us a very brief overview.
Yes, very, very
Let's
brief.
expand on that a little bit. And what I want to do eventually is find out where the overlaps are with the Way of Beauty. You interviewed me.
Yes.
You felt there was a strong interest in what I was doing. I hope that turned out to be the case.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't fishing for compliments.
No, we need to have you on again, because our recording went so long that Instagram wasn't able to save it. So I have to have you back on.
Oh, okay. I'd love to do it. Yeah. So tell us about Endow and its special mission and your place in it, and its relationship to those that it serves and helps.
Yeah, I think Endow is I mean, just in an institutional level, is incredible because it has personhood in canon law. So we have recognition by canon law, which is awesome. So if the hierarchy goes crazy on us, we can continue with our mission and press forward. But it responds to kind of the pain points that I experienced in my life, which is decades of bad catechesis, and also the desire for women to really like understand and know their faith, but not really knowing where to go. And so there's that aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that I think it's an authentic fruit of John Paul II and the Vatican II, in that we see so much in the secular culture, feminist movements and various waves of feminism, and disagreements about what that is, and the Me Too movement, and all these kind of things. Meanwhile, there is a plan for women. There's an authentic vocation that is distinct for women. And Pius XII actually addresses the feminine genius at a meeting, which is well before John Paul II. But John Paul II took out what the Second Vatican Council said about women, because it said it's basically the Vatican Council says that the time of women, like women need to be brought out for the renewal of the church in the modern world.
Mm-hmm.
And then John Paul II takes it a step further when he writes Mulieris Dignitatem in 1988, and then later on in 95, I think it's 95, Letter to Women. So it's kind of bringing that confidence back into women that there is an authentic place for you, not just as a human, but as a woman specifically, that the world is in need of, desperately in need of. And the stronger voices right now in the culture are not that of authentic femininity and the feminine genius, but of something very, very different and contrary. So Endow is a place of belonging for women to be affirmed in the fact that her desire to be holy and to be a part of the renewal of the church and to, you know, help form her family and her community and her parish and whatnot is valid and affirmed and backed up by John Paul II, and that we want to create places where women can grow in that and to understand what it is. I think if you ask most women in the church, feminine genius, what does that mean? Well, great question. What does that mean? Yeah. So there first has to be this recognition that the feminine vocation is real, and then what does it mean to like grow an understanding of that?
Right. Now I can imagine some listening to this, if people, probably not the usual people who listen to my podcast, but if anybody stumbles across this and they're listening to you and they're thinking, oh gosh, you want to push women back out of careers into the home, places in the home, and this is just sort of a repackaging of what happened before.
Right.
How do you respond to that?
That's a great question. This is how you respond to it right here, which is, this is our study guide. So how Endow cultivates the feminine genius is organizing women into small group communities and having them study through our study guide. So the beautiful thing about the study guide is that you will actually encounter the primary source. You're going to read John Paul II or whoever the study guide is about, or whatever writing there is. Then you're going to read a commentary on it to unpack it for you. So I guess you could say the secondary source. And then there are discussion questions so that the faith isn't something that just stays in your mind and you're having this like philosophical, theological discussion, but it's something that transforms you. So I think you're absolutely right. People are going to hear it and go, oh, so basically to be a stay-at-home homeschooling mom of like 20 kids. Well, I think you've just got to actually read The Inheritance of the Church. You just have to read John Paul II. Because in the very first few lines of his letter to women, he'll say, thank you, women who are mothers. Thank you, women who are wives. Thank you, women who are not married. Thank you, women who are workers in the professional field. And it's a letter he wrote to every single woman in the world, not just Catholic, not just Christian. And he is affirming every place that women are in society, which is everywhere. And he's saying you have a right to be in every area, every facet of society, but the way that you're going to be in every area, whether it's professional or at home or whatever, is going to be distinctly as a woman. There's a way of being a professional, a working woman that is different as a woman, that doesn't look like the masculine genius. And so they've just got to read him to be put in their place.
Which I'm going to admit I haven't on this. The thing that strikes me about this is that what distinguishes you from many radical feminists is not so much allowing women, if we can use that phrase, to follow a career or to do other things, if that's what they wish to do.
Right.
And if they feel they're called to do, and some will be, without doubt.
Yeah.
It's legitimizing as well. It's both and. It's saying that there is that traditional femininity, if we can call it that, is something that is extremely important and shouldn't be eliminated from this as well. But first of all, you can have combinations of these in a single personal vocation.
Exactly.
It's not one doesn't exclude the other, but also within the all women, if we can call it that, some people will want to do that role, the traditional role, and that is good. You want to encourage that.
Exactly. That's it. And our founders, the women who founded Endow, there are three main founders. These were very well educated professional women. So these were not stay-at-home women who that were just kind of twiddling their thumbs, as if that's even a thing that women at home do, right? That's kind of the bias against motherhood, because motherhood and staying at home wife and mom is such a difficult job. So it is really the affirmation of whatever, like you said, whatever your vocation is, your state in life. There are women who are called to be at home and need to be at home, and there are women who are called to be in the world more profoundly, and it's all legitimate. Everybody's different, but the actual founders of Endow were perchance, right, working professional women who encountered the writings of John Paul II and were validated in that, and also were hungry for the intellectual life, right? That how can we have been Catholics our whole life, right? And not even know about these incredible writings of John Paul II and just the incredible writings of the female doctors of the church and St. Thomas Aquinas and, St. Edith Stein and all these people, right? How is it that we've been Catholics our whole life, Sunday mass going in the pews, women, just like me? And how is it that I didn't even know about all this richness? So Endow is trying to make this kind of lofty inheritance accessible to your everyday Catholic woman.
Yeah. I'm just going to sort of throw in something personal here. On the whole, I'm pretty much in favor, I think, of what you would call the sort of liberation of women that took place in the 20th century. On the basis that I just described, that it doesn't exclude those who wish to do other things and wish to play a more traditional role. The other thing is that the question is, what is that traditional role? I think it's a caricature that I'm not sure ever really existed anyway.
Precisely. Well,
so there was a long article recently that someone showed me where it's saying that this 1950s ideal, if it existed, certainly wasn't there before. That prior to that, women did stay at home, but they did work, and they worked for they earned money while they're doing that. They did work that enabled them to be at home, that they could pick up and put back. And I was listening to that, and I then was reading the book of Proverbs, and in that they describe how there are women who will earn money through weaving. And so now, of course, it's of its time, but the principle here is that there's a continuum that between all that involves aspects of all of these roles, and people should be free to strive for the blend, I think, that fulfills them. And that is God's calling, but it's likely to be a combination of these things.
Exactly. We're seeing a much more nuanced social fabric, in general, but also within the church, that you can't have these simplistic categories. I mean, the church isn't monolithic, and sanctity isn't either. Sanctity is quite diverse. So, and Edith Stein, for example, I mean, she was single and a philosopher among primarily a field that was dominated by men, as many fields were at the time. But here's this incredible woman with an incredible intellect who was studying with these brilliant men philosophers who were encouraging her as a woman, and her writings, her philosophy became essential to John Paul II's theology of the body. But then what does she do? I think she was in her 40 years old when she entered the Carmelite monastery, and she has really struggled to get there in discernment and all that, and said, I'm finally home, right? So here's somebody who was, you would say from society's view, very radical, a woman in the philosophy field, and then becoming a Carmelite. You just can't put saints in a box. You can't put reality in a box. So I really appreciate what you said. And the first, I think it's called first wave feminism, right? All the, for the women's suffrage movement. These are women who were very pro-family and who were absolutely pro-life, and yet were working towards, equal opportunity. Okay. So here, that history proves what you're saying.
Great. Okay, so then what about the connection with what I do? And
Yes.
why were you even interested in recording a word that I said?
Well, beauty will save the world, right, David?
Yeah.
And I just think that women are supposed to, as in some way, transmit that beauty. God, we hope, to a world that is desperately in need of beauty. So when I met you, I was very excited to meet you, and so in much admiration for your work and for Pontifex. But I certainly think women, especially because of what you mentioned about needing to be in these different areas in the church and in the world, I would love to expose Endow women, especially, and any woman that encounters Endow, to the work that you do with the Way of Beauty and with Pontifex. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit right now.
Okay. So what? Well, you lead the discussion. Tell me what you think would be relevant to you. And in the process, it will give us greater insight, I think, into the sort of people who Endow reaches, and the people that are interested in what you have.
Yeah. So, not every woman that is an Endow study or an Endow group necessarily has clarified, I would say, in her mind, the need for the intellectual life. There are many motivations and reasons. Some women are looking more for community, and then happen to have a study guide that we produce that's very actually theologically rich.
Okay.
But then there are women who, I get emails that say, like, I'm so tired of decades of sentimentality and warm fuzzies, and I need an Endow study because I need to learn, and I need to engage the mind. And that in no way obliterates the feminine genius's, sensitivity to reality and so forth, but they work hand in hand. So with Pontifex, if there's a way that I just want women to know about it, and the classes that are offered, I don't think you have to necessarily do a whole degree program, but if there are women out there who are in Endow studies that want to learn more about the classes that are offered, particularly, I think the uniqueness of Pontifex and, the emphasis on beauty, I would love for you to talk about right now, because
Okay.
I think it's so important. And as we have more and more discussions in the church with evangelization and culture and beauty being a necessity in that, it's a scandal to me that we still have masses that are not beautiful, because when the first point of invitation to someone is the liturgy, and then not having something beautiful to invite anybody into, those things can only start to change with an education and an intellectual engagement. So that's where Pontifex can come in.
Yes. I think I'll talk a little bit about as you're speaking, I understand more now where Endow is coming from, that even than when we spoke earlier. I'll talk first about the Way of Beauty, which is there's a huge overlap with Pontifex, but Pontifex is an online university which offers courses which reflect a lot of this, and we'll talk about those programs in a second. But the Way of Beauty, as I see it, is, first of all, I'm glad that you talked about the lack of sentimentality. It's one of the things that I just cannot bear about. It's an aspect that pervades the Roman Catholic Church that I've never been able to. I've always taken on sufferance, if I can put it like that. Temperamentally, I'm just not like that. It's put me off many of the sort of common devotion or expressions of devotion to Mary.
Yes.
Is the language with which it's described, the sort of music to which it's put to. It's given me this picture of, if you could summarize the whole attitude of my picture of the attitude of the church to Mary at one point, it's summed up by one of those awful kitschy statues that it's just trying to generate syrupy emotion.
Right.
And instinctively, I just dig my heels in. I cannot bear it. It's not what I'm after. And I know there's more there. If you read the Church Fathers East and West. This is not how they talk about
no.
Our Lady at all.
Right.
And then you read some of the sort of meditations that go with the rosary, for example, that people read today, and I just cannot bear it. And so that's
the way that saints were. I mean, saints were talked about in such a saccharine way, and not at all in a real way.
Yeah.
But with Endow, I mean, women are wherever they go, women are going to make things beautiful and feminine. And certainly Endow groups in our study guides are beautiful and feminine. That's not the problem, right? But it's actually like learning so that we can have something rich to draw from to make things beautiful. So anyway, continue.
And so I would say that the way of beauty is very much similar to what you're describing, but the added dimension, or should we say, it may be there in Endow, but I haven't heard you refer to it specifically, is in praxis. It's actually in learning how to incorporate this into a beautiful, lived Christian life.
Yes.
Which is virtuous, which means that it people's, should we say, the masculine genius can shine through this as well, and each individual person's genius, their special calling, their special characteristics, each has a place in this mosaic.
Yes.
Which that they are an individual tessera. Is that the phrase? The little piece that goes in a pixel of light that goes and together we form the transfigured Christ, the mystical body of Christ.
Yes.
And this is really what we're aiming for, and especially my focus is on developing a spirituality, a prayer life that works, that is a liturgical piety, first of all, and then engages with a beautiful culture in the context of the liturgy. And because my experience is very much like yours with the churches, I don't really want to go in there and start wagging my fingers because I'll be complaining forever, because they have a way of agreeing with you than doing nothing. I mean, that's I'm sorry, priests, if you're listening. You're not all like that, but
they've got to be brave. They've got to be braver.
And they just, I barely any disagree with anything I say, but then nothing happens.
But then nothing happens.
Yeah.
Similar.
So I just thought, well, where can we go with this? And so it's through the domestic church, it's through the Liturgy of the Hours, where we can do something together. Something that I've started to do now, where we are, we're all in lockdown. So every evening at about 4:45, and there's the occasional gap, we just set my phone up and we put out on Facebook. I think we seem to get more people. We just sing choral evensong.
I've tuned in.
Okay.
And the nice thing about Facebook is you can host a watch party. So if I tune in live to your hours, then I can share it on my Facebook wall live, and other people who are my friends that wouldn't necessarily be exposed by you can tune in. So it's awesome.
Okay. Well, I'll text you when we're about to start each day, so you know.
Yeah.
But my principle in doing this is always, if I can do it at least as badly as anybody else, I might as well do it myself.
Yeah, very Chestertonian of you. If anything's worth doing, it's worth doing badly.
Yeah, exactly. And I looked around at the liturgy, at the attempts to sing the Liturgy of the Hours. I just thought, I don't like any of these, so I'm just going to work it out myself. Somebody asked me about this, who'd been watching this on Facebook. So what is it? Is this Anglican? Is it Eastern? I said, well, actually, musically, it's a combination of Byzantine, Anglican, and Gregorian chant. But the style with which it's presented, I'm interested to know whether this seems correct to you. I feel is actually strongly influenced by my experiences of the Melkites. So we put drones in there. So it means that First of all, if you don't know the melody, everyone can go, if you've ever been to the dentist, then you can do this, okay? And,
that's a great way to put it.
or if you sing in the shower, you can sing with us. And so anyone can join in. It has that, it's sung at quite a fast pace. So it is, my premise here is that you try and sing at the pace at which people are hardwired to listen, which is generally the pace at which people are hardwired to talk. In other words, we're made to communicate with each other. So if you have very, very slow melismatic things, now there is a place for that. By melismatic, I mean lots of notes on one syllable. There's a place for that occasionally. There is a place for that in the liturgy. But for the most part, if you're singing the Psalms, you want to be moving. And it has to be clear and understandable. We sing in the vernacular. I have no problems with the Latin Mass, especially those parts which are said regularly and are familiar. But for the Psalms, I think in order to pray it, it has to be in the language that you're used to talking in. And then the goal is to combine that. So this is in the context of the domestic church, which seems very appropriate. Any group of people can get together. You can have a social event. You can pray and then eat and then discuss on anything you like. But also to combine that worship with art. We have the music there, so posture, so we're bowing with the Trinity, and this is engaging the whole person. And of course, the words of the liturgy are the place at which we encounter the word, and which all the intellectual study that you're offering should suddenly be just leaping off the pages as you pray it. That is the goal. That's how it impresses itself upon your soul or your heart. Then we are transformed and we become the people who you talked about, you need to have friends. Well, we start to become those friends, despite ourselves. If I put it like that, it's not something, I'm not learning life skills here. I'm just becoming despite all my inabilities, someone who is more skilled at life and
integrated and virtuous, right?
Yes.
So and this while you were speaking, I was getting inspired because it reminded me of what Bishop Fulton Sheen said about, I'm paraphrasing him, but civilization hinges on women. How can he make that claim? Because if women are truly the center of affect and the heart of the home, the domestic church and so forth, then if we don't have women who are integrated, virtuous, transformed, how can they then be spiritual mothers and transform and be agents of transforming a culture? So.
Well, and yes, and the way I see it is every person has their unique role to play. Every person has to be encouraged to explore these things and find their particular role, whether it's as an academic, or as at home, or as a combination of these things, or as a cloistered nun or monk.
Yes, absolutely. And the more the feminine genius is cultivated and truly becomes a genius of, for women in the church and salt and light for culture, the more the masculine genius will be strengthened, right? So women, and the reverse is also true. So we affect each other and need the other for this to work right.
Yes. It's interesting as you speak. What I'm doing with my time at home here is that I just bought Pascal's Ponce's.
Oh, how lovely!
Which as an audio book. I have to admit I can't listen to it for long stretches because it's quite intense little sound bites, if I can call it that. But I suddenly thought, well, actually, I'm going to write these down and start producing a load of blog posts. And if there's any merit to them, I'll bundle them up.
That's great.
Sort of Clayton's Ponces or something like that.
Oh, I love that. You should do that. That's
well, we'll see how it goes. I don't know. But one of the things that occurred to me that's connected to this is someone asked me, when I was, the weekend that I met you, when I was down in Los Angeles, I was speaking for an organization called Stone to Flesh, which is in northern LA, and it's a group of young people with a similar focus, actually, and they'd invited me down to speak to them. And one guy said, I just can't understand the Trinity. So who are we? Are we worshipping Jesus? Are we worshiping? And so, of course, not an easy question to answer at the best of times. I don't know how qualified I am. So this is what I thought about. I said, well, here's what I suggest you do. Read the Saint Athanasius's creed, which really articulates it. It sort of talks about them individually, but if I can use that phrase, but then always stresses there is one God.
Mm-hmm.
If one does it, the others do it, even though we tend to sort of interface with one particular aspect of God, if I can call it that. But then I was thinking, well, actually, if the reason we struggle with this is because each of us is a human person, and we're used to being an entity that is a person, and we don't have the interrelationships within us. We relate beyond ourselves. And so that's the struggle that we have, that I'm relating to you now. We're both persons, and so this is connecting us, but we are definite blobs at the end of a line, if you see what I put it like that. Whereas within God, it's an internal relationality, which is all contained with this simple aspect of God. But I thought, well, actually, there is a place where we are persons within a greater whole, and that is within the body of Christ. That the body of Christ, Christ is one of the persons of the Trinity, but at the same time, he is multi-personal in the sense that there are lots of us. We are those tesserae within the mosaic of Christ.
Yes.
And each of us has that special role. And that really is what we want to be encouraging, I think, for every single person.
Absolutely.
So
I love that. And it's one of my passions, actually, because I think one of the biggest lies the evil one tells us is that we don't matter and that we don't have, leadership in the church, and I don't mean leadership in official leadership, but just that each person who's living his vocation, whatever that is, in whatever field or whatever state in life, is essential to the body of Christ. And if anybody listening is doubting that, go read Corinthians 12 and really take it seriously.
And the paradox here is that in conforming to it is the greatest freedom. We'll feel most truly ourselves. And it is a paradox because it sounds like a discipline that is restricting, but it isn't at all. It's liberating. When we discover this, and it's only in Christianity that this is possible, because it's only in Christianity through Christ that we can become part of the mystical body of Christ and know our place in relation to other Christians. But then, of course, that makes that point that you made so well earlier important, that we have to be there as visible members to other Christians. This relationality is vital.
Yes, and I think one of the, in the midst of the coronavirus and all of that, I think one of the silver linings is that we're out there in social media in a way that we haven't ever been before. And I'm seeing people, Facebook friends of mine, who would never come to Mass if I invited them, but I see that they're watching my live stream Mass on my Facebook. And you know, I participated in a Catholic poetry slam virtually, and you know, you're doing the hours, and even in the limited way of social media, we're out there in a way that we haven't been before. And social media culture is so much dominated by culture of death and ugliness that now, because it's all we have to be connected to the body of Christ, we're out there in a way we haven't been before, and people are really seeing it and seeing the creativity that comes in Christianity.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a nice silver lining.
I agree. Now, I think that we should talk about what I'll very quickly cover Pontifex, but actually I think that we can save that and the way of beauty.
I'll have you back on.
But especially for Endow, thinking about how this might help the women that are interested as a part in Endow particularly, would be very interesting to explore. What I will say briefly for those from Endow who are listening is that Pontifex is an online university, so all our programs are online, and for the most part are recorded, and so it means that you can sign on at any time. You work at your own pace according to your own schedule. So it suits this idea of having, for those who have multifaceted lives, it's something that would allow you to incorporate this by degrees, shall we say, degree by degree. We have master's degrees, as it suits you. And at the moment we have 4 programs. We have a theology doctorate, which is low coursework, high research emphasis, more in the British model. If you have a master's in theology, the chances are you'll do no coursework and be able to go straight to research. If you don't have a master's in theology, then you can do that with us too. So we have a master's of theological studies. We also have a Master of Sacred Arts program, which I designed, and is really an academic presentation of the way of beauty. It teaches you about it. In the end, we try and teach you to do it, but in the end, that's down to you. You have to practice the principles. And then we have an MA in the theology of the body and the new evangelization, which is headed up by Christopher West, who many of you will have heard of. So we're working with the Theology of the Body Institute in Philadelphia for that. So we can talk about that on another occasion. I'll just let you finish. Somehow that gradually shifted towards me talking.
No, I know there's going to be Endow women who listen to this podcast. Because I'll share it with all of our Endow women. So I'm very grateful to you for spelling that out for them. And Endow women that are listening, or future Endow women that are listening, please reach out to me if you are unable to find. I mean, of course, you can Google Pontifex and Way of Beauty and so forth, but if you just kind of want to talk to somebody about it, also please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on our website, endowgroups.org, or through Instagram. You can DM and you'll be put in touch with me on Instagram. So just find one of us, me or David, and it just doesn't hurt to ask questions and learn more. So
okay, and I will say that I'm going to post this under the podcasts page at thewayofbeauty.org, which again, we're talking to 2 different sets of people here. The Way of Beauty people already know that because they're on it, but the Endow people are listening. That's where you can find me. And then the Way of Beauty people, you just heard how to contact Simone. I'm hoping many of you will be interested in finding out more about Endow. One of the interesting things, I know I keep digressing, but
I love it.
this will be the last thing.
No, I love it.
The Stone to Flesh group that I met, one of the founders of this used to be a evangelical pastor, I think, and he loves the Catholic faith, very orthodox in his faith. Keith Major, a great guy, and I don't know if he'd be listening to this actually, He and his wife have started this. Really, I was extremely impressed by what they do. But one of the things that he said to me is that as a former evangelical, he gets very frustrated at how the lack of community in Catholic churches and the lack of evangelical with a little e, sort of fervor and creativity. And he talked about how at one of these mega churches that's somewhere down in LA, a very famous one, I think the name escapes me, but you know the sort of thing, these huge sort of mega.
The Saddleback Church?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Okay. And he said that there are, I think he said 800 or 8,000 home, and a huge number of home groups. So basically they form these clusters. And so that's how they get community, and and these are very strong in attracting people. And he said so strong, a lot of people just attend the home-based network and never get to the church. Now, as Catholics, we don't want to encourage that. People need the liturgy offered in the church as well. But what we don't have is enough of that human fellowship. And it seems to me that Keith's doing his work. That's exactly what you're doing. It's through clusters of people and groups of people that are small enough so that you make friendships, that this happens. And that's something that we seem to have forgotten. It seems just within the Catholic Church.
Yeah, it's a natural need. I mean, it's, and I think from hearing your story too, David, I mean, I think I remember you mentioning going to the oratory, going to mass, and then going to lunch. I mean, and that that matters.
Yes,
and we need blocks of time for intimate friendship and community, but to be based on something deep, right? And not deep, all heady, but deep that's transformative and integrated. And so Endow, it's again, there are other things you can use, but Endow is a kind of a no-brainer in that you're studying in sick people encyclicals and female doctors of the church and like the inheritance of the church. It's a no-brainer. But I'm so passionate about that, because for me, the intellectual conversion wasn't enough. I needed the community, but I needed a warm, fuzzy, sentimental community is not Christian, actually. Right. So it's a country club.
So give us the website address again.
Yeah, so it's endowgroups.org.
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 And for the Endow people, I'm thewayofbeauty.org. Pontifex is pontifex.university. W's pontifex.university. And if you're not interested in any of the things we've said, and you think you can do it at least as badly as we can, then go and do it. Set up your own network. Find your crowd in which you share the faith.
Exactly.
Without sentimentality. The more there are, the better.
Yes, exactly. And David, may I say one thing? If somebody wants to reach me on a personal level, you can go to my blog, culturalgypsy.com.
Culturalgypsy.com. Okay, great.
And just another, we've got 20 study guides going, and we have a study guide in the works right now on Catholic social teaching, which I think will be we have the outline for it, and the author is currently working on it, but it is going to be incredible, our study guide on Catholic social teaching. And there's just so much more I can say. For many of you who have a charism of evangelization, maybe you've got your community, maybe you've got your group, but you actually want to create a space of belonging for other women, and you don't know what program to use and whatnot. Well, this is a natural choice. So. Okay.
All right, we'll finish there. Simone Rizkallah, thank you very much indeed. Terrific. I can't wait till the next time we do it.
Likewise.
Okay.
God bless you.
God bless you.
You've been listening to the Way of Beauty podcast, conversations on Catholic faith and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, then please give us a 5-star review on iTunes. This will help others to find it too. Also, if you're interested in delving more deeply into the material that we discuss, you can do a course at the Pontifex University website. That's pontifex.university.